Hello, everyone. You are listening to She Leads with Carly, and in this show, we talk to the absolute best, brightest, and yes, badass leaders. I'm your host, Carly Malatsky. Hello, everyone. I'm incredibly excited to welcome today's guest, Michelle Zatlyn. Michelle is the co-founder of Cloudflare, the leading connectivity cloud company that blocks billions of threats online for its customers every day. Michelle, along with her co-founders, has scaled the company from a Harvard Business School project to integral internet infrastructure that keeps the world safe and secure online, operating 20% of the global web. Let that sink in, by the way. Cloudflare is used by about 20% of all websites on the internet for web security services, blocking 247 billion cyber attacks every single day. Michelle is the only female founder currently running a public company valued over $60 billion, let alone a cybersecurity company. She recently led Cloudflare to its first $1 billion in annual revenue, and under her leadership has brought in 36% of the Fortune 500 as paying customers, leading a team of over 4,000 employees around the world. In September, Cloudflare will celebrate a big milestone, its 15-year anniversary. Michelle earned her bachelor's degree from McGill University in chemistry and business before receiving her MBA from Harvard Business School. Michelle, it is such an honor. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you so much. And thank you for all that. Such a kind introduction, Carly. And yeah, I'm excited for our conversation.
Me too. So, Michelle, what I love to do and how I honestly get started with every episode is I want to know about 10-year-old Michelle, your childhood. From what I know, you grew up in a small town in Canada called Saskatchewan. I might be butchering that, but tell me a little bit about your childhood. What kind of kid were you?
Yes. Yeah. No, you did a good job. You're so far, Carly, really good with words. So great job. I am from Saskatchewan. It's the prairie part of Canada. And I was from a close-knit family. I'm the middle child of 3 sisters. So a little bit of the peacekeeper. I was very into sports, did figure skating. It's very cold. We have long winters where I grew up. So you do a lot of winter sports during the winters and then a lot of different sports in the summer, whether it was volleyball or soccer, or you name it, tennis. I did a lot of piano. I was a very scheduled kid. Like I went to school, and after school, my mom and dad had me in a lot of different programs and activities to make sure that I was building skills and meeting people and growing as a human being. And so feel really lucky to be from my family. The other thing is my grandparents were farmers. And so home cooked food was a big deal in my family. Like farm to table is how I grew up every single day. We always had a garden in the backyard. My mom was always picking lettuce in the summer, making salads. And so to this day, that stays with me. My favorite thing to do today is to go to the farmer's market and cook a meal. And so I think it really is from this 10-year-old Michelle that you just asked me about.
That's amazing. And looking back at your childhood, were there any signs of who you are today that would lead to where you are today, of being a founder of a big company? Any signs that kind of lead to that?
Probably a better question for my parents than me, but as I'm still close to my parents, and I think that I was someone who was a very capable 10-year-old or child, always striving for more, curious, and I think those were good attributes into today running as a leader. The other thing is I was able to work with lots of different people, both as a child and then today. And I think when you are running a large organization like Cloudflare today, it's over 4,000 people. You have to work together. And actually, that's my favorite part of my job. I love working with folks. And I think it's one of the great stories in tech or business that maybe doesn't get told enough is actually, I spend so much of my day partnering internally with teams. And I love that. That's like where my happy place is. And I think it's, I think back to when I was on the captain of my basketball team and being on a team and winning together. Like I unfortunately am not going to play in the NBA. That I don't have those skills. However, like at work, I feel like I get to help build teams and win as a team and lead these teams. And so a lot of the aspects that I loved as a child that I see today. And so I think there's moments like that. But, there's also, you have no idea. Like it's just, I think back to even in my 25 or 30, I never thought this exactly. I didn't think it wasn't possible. I just didn't spend very much time thinking about it. So I think like if there's a listener being like, well, I never think about that. Like neither did I. That wasn't what I was spending my day thinking about. It just more this opportunity presented itself and I fell in love with being like, I have to see where this goes. And it kept kind of opening up more and more pathways.
Which, by the way, is so fascinating to me because you're right. There are these like 2 archetypes, if you will. One is the founder from day 0, right? Like they're born to be a founder. They can't really work for anyone else. they're meant to do that versus someone else, kind of how you described, where the opportunity presented itself and one thing led to another and you're leading this huge company. So we're going to get into that. We'll get into more details, but you end up going to McGill. So you stay in Canada and you decide to study chemistry and business, right? So in my mind goes to, medicine, pre-med. How were you thinking about your career at that stage in life in college?
Yes, yes. Well, so where I grew up, most people went to the university in the province. And so it was actually a big deal that I would left the province to go to McGill. And I remember talking to, a community member and another dad of one of my friends. And I remember he said, "Well, why are you going to McGill for university?" And I said, "Well, what are you going to study?" And I said, "Oh, I'm going to study chemistry." He's like, "Don't they have chemistry at the U of S, the University of Saskatchewan?" I'm like, "No, they do." He's like, "Well, then why are you going all the way there for the program here?" Which is a totally fair question. And so I think that was a totally fair question. My parents had a perspective of you can always come home, but you need to go see the world. You need to go see more of the world, and you can always come back if you want. And again, I'm lucky to have parents who had that perspective. So I went to McGill, and when I was a teenager, I loved science, I loved math, I really did love those subjects a lot at school. I excelled at them. I did all the extra programs you could think of, and I really thought I was going to be a doctor. And I really wanted to be a doctor because I wanted to help people, and it's intellectually very interesting. And so those were what I really kind of set out to do. And so studying chemistry was a great path to be able to do that. And I also think chemistry answers most of the questions in the world, which I found very interesting. And it was interesting, though, that as I did my schooling, I always kept saying every time, like at the end of the class, the professor, "Okay, this is a really interesting concept. How does it get applied practically in the real world or in industry?" And that was something that was, especially in the early part of my college degree, there wasn't a lot of good answers. It was really much the theoretical pieces of it. And this thing, like, how do you apply it practically now? There was a lot of gaps. And then I ended up going to do a summer program with some doctors and a research project. It actually ended up winning awards. It was like a big deal, very big success. And I spent this whole summer in the hospital with these 3 doctors. It was amazing, but I didn't love it. Like, I didn't love it. And I kind of was like, "Oh my God, I just want awards for this," but I'm not. I could tell that I didn't love it. And so I started to, for the first time, question, do I really want to be a doctor? And for years, that's what I thought. That's what I told myself. Like, my parents told their friends, "Oh, yeah, Michelle's pre-med." And all of a sudden, I'm like, well, I'm not sure I want to do that. And it was like, whoa, 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 what do you want to do instead? And I had no idea because I had been on this path to be a doctor. Like, everything in my free time, I didn't even know what the other options were. And so I started to expand the scope, and I minored in business. And even that was like so eye-opening. I learned all these new things that I didn't know before, and lingo and language and types of people that were very different than my science classes that I had to interact with. And it kind of just expanded my horizons. Fast forward, I ended up falling in love with technology. I decided not to go to med school. So there was a very happy ending to the story, but in the moment, it was not clear. And when I called my parents, be like, "Hey, I'm not sure I'm going to go to apply to med school right after college," my parents were like, "Excuse me, what? What are you going to do?" And I'm like, "I'm going to get a job." They're like, "Doing what?" I was like, "I have no idea. I'm going to figure it out."
No, I think what I love about that story, one, it's actually quite unique in that you were getting external positive affirmations, right? Like, you were doing well. There was proof to show you that, like, you know what, you could actually be an excellent professional in medicine. And here you're tapping into your own, psyche of saying, like, okay, but do I love it? Am I getting energy from it? Which is quite hard then to take that step, because I feel like in college, the mindset is like, am I just on the right path? Am I going to have security in my job? So how did you, like, going deeper into that mentality in that moment of saying, you know what, I'm actually going to tell my parents I'm not doing medicine. I'm going to figure it out as it goes. How did you navigate that? Did you talk to mentors? Did you just do research on your own? What was that process like for you?
That would have both been 2 good ideas for me. I did neither of those. But that would have been a really good idea. I should have called you back then. I did not do either of those things. Of course, I think friends are so important at that point in your life. So I did talk to friends, but my friends were my peers at school, so they didn't really know. You just
Blind leading the blind.
Yes, exactly. So sometimes talking to your friends makes you feel better, but you actually don't always get the best advice, I would say. So it's not something you can ask your parents what they think, 'cause they just don't know. And by the way, you're in charge of your own life. Like, and the risk aversion, playing it safe, the security, you're on a path. What do you mean? Like, it's now as a parent, I can understand how hard that would have been. The call my parents got when I called them, I'm sure they were not thrilled by the news, let's say it that way. Of course, they couldn't do anything about it, but they were not thrilled. And so when I think back to that moment, I think the first thing is I de-risked it a little bit. What I mean by that was it wasn't like, hey, I'm dropping out of science and doing this something totally different. It was like, I'm not sure, so I'm going to diversify. I'm going to add a minor to my degree. That gives you a cover. Like, not all this has to be dramatic. So it was dramatic, but it was a step in that direction. So I added a minor. And so my major stayed the same. It was more I'm adding a minor. And so, okay, well, if the school lets you do that, you're going to graduate on time. It was kind of like, well, if that's what you want to do. Like, okay. Now, the bigger shock when I said I'm not going to apply straight to med school, it was like, what? What are you going to do? And I really didn't know. And I had an older sister. She had worked in finance. I'm like, I'm going to go work in finance like Nicole does, my older sister. And so I knocked on a lot of doors to get into that industry because, again, I kind of came from an atypical background, and it was humbling. And I think often in tech, a little bit like if you're a founder, there's like the folks who know they want to start a company and do everything they can to start a company. That was not me. I was in this other camp. But I also think about it with jobs. There's folks who never have to look for a job, but are always employed because they get pulled into roles. There's other people who actually have to look for a job. It's hard. Like, what do I want to do? And you have to hustle. You got to talk to people. You got to present yourself. You got to go through the interview process. And so when I think back to that, it was hard, but I actually learned a ton of great skills having to go through that. You kind of learn like how to present yourself. What do they want to hear? You got to say it in a succinct way to put your best foot forward, to put yourself in a situation where you're going to get the job offer. And so by departing from my path, I had to build all of this kind of hustle skills that actually has been incredibly helpful as an entrepreneur. I just stayed on the path I definitely wouldn't have built. And so I think those were, sometimes you make these choices in life and you end up, in the moment, it was not easy and I wasn't sure it was true. You look back at yourself and you think, okay, now all the dots connect and it's kind of led me to everything for today.
Totally. I just want to point out, by the way, like even my first question of, are there little signals from your childhood that represent or at least come through in the founder you are today? And I think that story of you having the courage to say, like, you know what, I'm actually going to go off the beaten path that people think I'm going to go on also is like a very much like a founder trait, right? Like not being quite disagreeable, contrarian, and just holding your own conviction, I think is quite important as a founder. So I can see that for sure. You end up, like you said, you graduate from McGill. By the way, was it always your intention to come to the States? Was that always like your plan to go into tech, or what was that process, leaving your family, all of that?
No, and I didn't know. I mean, students today are lucky. Like entrepreneurship technology is so much more widespread. I think it's better understood as a career path for sure compared to 10 years ago, and definitely compared to 25 years ago when I was graduating college. I find that where I grew up, and even in smaller communities, often it's like teacher, doctor, dentist, lawyer, accountant. There's like some very well-defined career paths that parents understand, parents' friends understand, that you can look to your people in your life like, oh yeah, I understand what this job is, veterinarian, I want to do that. If you live in certain centers, there's lots of entrepreneurs in tech, but sometimes you live in certain parts of the world, like there aren't a lot of tech jobs. So it makes sense that you wouldn't see tech mentors around you. So no, like when I was graduating, it was the boom of the Silicon Valley. So I knew a little bit of what was going on the web. It was like totally the internet boom, then bust. But I didn't really know what that meant. I mean, Montreal and Silicon Valley are worlds apart at that point in life. So I ended up getting a job in financial services. Again, I didn't know. I did not do good research. I did not have an amazing career counselor that changed my life. I didn't have any of those things. Like it was really me paving my own path. And when you pave your own path, you don't get everything right at the front. I'm much smarter about asking for help, talking to people, reaching out to networks today than I was back then. But it was interesting. I started in financial services and I was living in Toronto at the time. And no, I didn't think about going to the US. I was living in Toronto. And again, that was far from where I was living. And I was having a great time. I was in my 20s and it was like kind of had a Melrose Place situation where I had great roommates and we had great roommates above us. And it was super fun. We were like a super fun time living kind of our 20s in Toronto, did all the intramural stuff. Like it was awesome. And actually through that, I met an entrepreneur. It was so outside the mold of everything I had seen to that point. And I really liked that. I was like, oh my God. Like, I just like the way like, oh, we can go make that happen. I'm like, yes, let's go make it happen. Everything else had been so like structured. So meeting this person who was like an ideas person and loved to make it happen and could just like, well, we'll just assemble the resources and make it happen. I like really got a lot of energy from that. So I ended up going to work at a startup through this connection. I loved it. It was like my first time where I really did love what I did. I was like, oh my God, like all of a sudden we're like leading with our hearts and smarts, but like you really like felt passionate and we were winning against the incumbents and we were doing all this cool stuff. It was called I Love Rewards at the time. But it was interesting that we were all very gung-ho folks and we got a lot of stuff done, but there certainly wasn't a lot of experience in the room. And I felt was like, okay, again, I was in my 20s. I need to learn from somebody. Like I really need to myself, but also smart enough to know like, gosh, I will learn a lot faster if I had someone to learn from. So I ended up going to take a job at a bigger tech company, Toshiba, which was like the exact opposite, but just to learn from like professional operators. And I learned a ton of through that. And so at some point, I had a realization, okay, I'm definitely not going to med school. So now like years later, I was like, I've closed off that path, keep working in business and tech. I love it. But I should round out my business skills because again, I was learning on the job. And of course you can learn on the job, but I was like, I'm going to go do my MBA and ended up going to apply to do my MBA. That's how I ended up coming to the US.
First of all, I love that story mainly because, to be honest, that's why I'm doing this podcast. I believe the power of exposure, right? Like, so you being exposed to that founder opened your whole mind into this whole world of startups, of, you have your own personal, conviction in a problem, go and solve it. Like, that is so amazing. And there's like that tangible impact that kind of, planted a seed in you. Okay, so you ultimately decide to go pursue an MBA at Harvard Business School, which looking back probably changed, quite a significant trajectory in your entire life. What I want to know is deciding to go to HBS, did you have in mind what your goal was 2 years later coming out of HBS? Because I find that the advice you get is if you go in lost, you'll probably come out lost, but if you go in with a goal, then that's worth your time, money, everything. How did you approach Harvard Business School?
So first of all, totally changed my life. My background is different than other people's background, but for me, it literally changed my life and opened up so many more paths that wouldn't have been impossible by not going there, but certainly would have been a lot harder to get access to. So I am very grateful to what amazing academic institutions can do for somebody. And same with programs. Actually, I've been a part of lots of programs that have changed my life in lots of different ways. Just back to your point of, when you get access or you see something, it kind of democratizes. It doesn't matter where you're from then. And again, I'm a small town Saskatchewan girl, kind of making a big impact in the world. And it's through a lot of these programs that a lot of people put a lot of work into. It's like, okay, if you work hard enough and are smart, you can navigate, you can get to where you need to be. The opportunities are there. So HBS totally changed my life. And I remember, most things in your life, I'm in my 40s now. I feel like lots of things that are so important to you in the moment, over time you forget about. New memories get made and new, more important things. I feel like my essay that I wrote to apply to HBS is like forever imprinted in my brain. And I should go back and find it because I for sure have it, on one of my hard drives, but I won't read the whole thing. Or I won't recite the whole thing. And I couldn't. But the one part that I feel like is forever imprinted in my brain is, of course, you have to have a good reason to go. And I had a great reason. It's like, look, I was on this career path, was like, I'm not sure, and now I'm really not sure, and I've fallen in love with this other thing, but I need to go build my skill set. And I think doing 2 years in an MBA program is the best way to do that. And I'm very committed to doing that. Like, so that was that. And so, but of course, they're like, what do you want to do after? My exact sentence was, I want to be a part of a team. I had done growth teams at the startup. I had been part of more of a company that was losing market share. Growth is much more fun than companies that are losing market share. So I said, I want to join a company, Google before it was Google, Starbucks before it was Starbucks, and be on the team to help win the hearts and minds of its customers. That's exactly what I wrote. And it didn't have to be my company. I didn't say it, but I wanted to be in a growth company that one day was going to turn into a Google or a Starbucks. So I spent all of HBS looking for that. And I didn't know what it was. It was my first time living in the US. I moved here in my late 20s to go to business school here. And it was culturally a big shock, even though I'd visited many times and it seems not, but there was lots of differences. All of a sudden, somebody who had done pretty well in most things in my life, all of a sudden the bar got reset much higher and I had to work a lot harder to keep up. Again, this humbling, okay, let's do this. You have to dig deep again. And you're like, okay, let me do this. And it was interesting. Every time, one of the things that you don't hear about these MBA programs is there's a lot of companies and speakers who come back to the school. And so it was amazing for someone who I wasn't set on an industry. I knew that I wanted to go work at a company that I cared about what the company did. And I really wanted to be part of its growth story. So people would come and be like, what's interesting? What's growing? And so it was just kind of like a green field, but I really could talk to explore all these different spaces. And so I ended up really getting close to LinkedIn at the time. And LinkedIn was still a private company. So it was pre-IPO. And I mean, let's face it, that would have been a great job because it was,
Right.
it was
You would have been fine too. But yes,
pre-IPO company, so many smart people. I was going to join the team. I had done a independent study for them. They really liked the work. So the person I did it for offered me a job. It was like I had hit the jackpot. I had manifested exactly what my essay had said. 2 years later, my admissions essay, I was like, I made it happen. Like, this is the job offer that matches that. In parallel, I had met a classmate and we started to work on a school project that literally turned into Cloudflare in parallel in our second semester, second year of business school. I kept saying, like, there's something here. And I was like curious, but like, oh my God, there's a real problem. We came up with a really clever solution. I think there's a real business model here. So I kind of fell more and more in love with it every month that went by. And it was so fun to work on it. And again, with a small team with Matthew. But I'd be like, am I really going to walk away from this dream job to go do that? Like, my dream job was to go at this. And a little bit like the courage to have to take the atypical path. Like, I did. I had to see where it went because, again, the opportunity was there. And I was like, I wasn't ready for it to fold. I had to see where it went. And so it presented itself while I was at HBS. I didn't look for it, but I was looking for this other thing. And I think, like, sometimes in the act of doing, lots of opportunities present itself. And that's where you want to keep your eyes open.
Okay. I have so many questions, but keeping on that path, right, is you have an amazing story that I've heard where you actually go to the person at LinkedIn who, recruited you or at least was part of that journey of joining LinkedIn. And it was basically him where you'd be like, I'm either joining or I'm not. Tell me the story of what his reaction was when you essentially told him, look, I have to see this through with Matthew.
Okay. So a little context. Sometimes I cannot believe I did this, but anyhow, so it was May of 2009. And so May of 2009 was not a frothy time. Financial crisis, jobs were scarce. I had a great job offer at a great company. And I remember, like, less of the class had jobs than normal because, again, there was this recession. So they gave students who didn't have a job $500, hadn't signed a job yet, $500 to help them in their job search if you had to get on an airplane or something. So I took the $500 and I flew out to California. And it was interesting. I was doing that to both work on my Cloudflare stuff, but also met with this particular, the hiring manager, my soon-to-be boss at LinkedIn at the cafeteria down in Mountain View. And I went, and I mean, I did not have 100% conviction. I tell that story because I think that there's a lot of folks out there who be like, oh, I knew exactly what I was doing. I did, but it was still really hard. So I showed up to meet this person and I said, oh my God, thank you so much for the offer. Like, literally, this is what I set out to do. You gave me my dream offer. Like, this is what I went to business school to get. And I loved working with you for the last 4 months on this independent study. I want to join, but unfortunately, I've started to work on a project in parallel and I got to see where it goes. So I can't take your job offer. I got to go work on this project, our company called Cloudflare. And this person looked me straight in the eye and said, you are making the biggest mistake of your life. Because it was a rocket ship. He's like, we're pre-IPO, we're about to go public.
In 2009, by the way. So, like, things aren't great.
Things aren't great. YCs technically exist, but not the company it is today. Entrepreneurship is not as well understood as it is today. To him, like, I can't believe you're giving up this offer to go do that. Like, he wasn't wrong. And I think sometimes, like, back to our conversation before, like, sometimes you go to your girlfriends for advice and sometimes they give you really bad advice, or your parents and they give you really bad advice because they're doing the risk adverse path. I think, like, there's been so many times where sometimes folks come to me at Cloudflare now and I'm like, you shouldn't do that. You should definitely do this instead. But sometimes you got to go learn yourself, right? And so I understood why he was advocating because it was a great option. And in retrospect, I didn't know it in the moment. In retrospect, I had two amazing options. I was so lucky to be in that position. And while that was an amazing option, I just had to go see what this other option was because it was a moment in time. And I said to him, look, you might be right. This might be the biggest mistake, but I have to go see where this goes. And if it goes nowhere, you're my first call and I don't want to burn a bridge and maybe you'll still hire me anyway. That's not what I'm not going to bet on it. I'll still have to work for it. But, like, I hope we can stay in touch. And again, I think everyone played their part just fine in that thing. We left on good terms and we're still connected today. And again, I think everyone's happy. Everyone's happy. It all worked out to be great. And so
I'm sure he's like, okay, you were onto something. Maybe you were right. But
yeah.
Yes.
And he's very happy for our success, which is great. And so, the fact that, like, I walked away from that, moved to a place I'd never lived before, and I didn't have a lot of money to go give this idea a go was crazy. But then also, it's on some of the hand, having very little to lose except for this great job offer that I did. It was almost the best time to do it too, because you're like, your cost of living is low, there are low expectations. So you can go and kind of put your blinders on and just go and try and make it all happen without all of these expectations around you. And again, I think Matthew Lee and I did a lot with that opportunity, which is pretty cool.
Absolutely. I think what's so funny is because, right, hindsight 2020, you're looking back, you're kind of reflecting on it, but I mean, Michelle, in that moment, you must have like an incredibly high risk appetite, right? To do that, to go and start a company, in my mind, could be crazy. Like at the end of the day, you're presented this job, you have a salary, there's all these things where a startup can absolutely, 9 out of 10 times isn't going to fail. But did that enter your mind of like, were you thinking, okay, worst case, it fails. What is that okay? That's fine.
Okay, so it's a little bit like how people make decisions and a little bit like how did I get comfortable with this decision? So I, at the time, would get comfortable with making kind of a big call like this by going through the worst case scenarios in my mind. So my worst case scenario was I'm going to not take the LinkedIn job offer. I'm going to start Cloudflare and it blows up. Okay. Now, there was added complexity, and I don't get into all the details, but as a Canadian, I could stay here because I went to school here, I could stay for a year, kind of doing anything. So I had a year before I had to get like a legitimate, like, that's right. I was on a legitimate visa. I got to be careful. I was on a legitimate visa, but the visa I was on let me work on lots of different things, including a startup, versus but it only lasted a year. It's called, and after OPT, you have to get an H-1B or an L visa, like some other type of visa types. We don't have to go through immigration right now. And to get an H-1B, you have to be working in a legitimate company. So in my mind, I was like, okay, I have a year to kind of get this going. If it doesn't work, I mean, I did have a degree from Harvard Business School, which I think was like, some people find that impressive. I'm like, I'll look for another job. They have to sponsor me for their H-1B, which is hard. That is not an easy thing. And like the narrative is that's not easy. And of course it's possible, but not easy. So again, I'm going through the worst case scenarios. Worst case scenario is I get the job and I can't get the H-1B and I got to move back to Canada. I can always go back to Canada. My boyfriend at the time was living in Vancouver and we were in a good relationship. I was like, okay, I'll go move in with Jamie in Vancouver and then I'll get a job in Vancouver. Okay, not my top choice, but I can do that. I can knock on a lot of doors. Okay, what if Jamie and I break up? Like I literally went through this and I was like, hey, when they break up, I guess my older sister was living in Boston at the time and my younger sister was living in London at the time because normally I'd say I'll go move in with my sister. Again, if you don't have an income, I'm like, okay, well, if I literally don't have a job and I break up with Jamie and I can't get a visa for the US, I guess I'm going home to live with my parents. And I literally remember sitting in my college dorm room when I was making this decision. I was like, pretty random that I like took all these risks to get to HBS because I had moved to Montreal, lived in Toronto, now lived in Boston, done this Google internship in New York, back to Boston. And be like, decided to do Cloudflare and everything went bust and I ended up back in my parents' basement in Saskatchewan. Like, that's literally what I thought. But I was like, I get along with my parents. I could spend more time with my grandmother. Like, I was like, not my top choice. And I think I could get a job from, like, I'd have to really hustle to get a job, but like, it would be not my thing, but I at least had somewhere to go. And again, that was how I got comfortable. I was like, I can live with that outcome.
Absolutely. No, I love it. I think that's a really important framework, if you will, for making decisions. Like, okay, but at the end of the day, what's the worst case? Like there's something really valuable there. So those early days in Cloudflare, even actually deciding, right, we're going to move to Silicon Valley. What's so amazing to me is that this is a very technical company. Like cybersecurity in my mind is this black box. It's very hard to tap into and to understand. And from your background, it didn't seem like you had a truly technical background. So what elements to you spoke, mountains of this is an incredible opportunity. I have to see this through.
Yeah, and this is something that I think is an important point that thank you for raising it, because I find like a lot of women sometimes want to work in things they really understand, and that's totally awesome. And sometimes I'm like, okay, or something they love. I'm like, also, I think another framing is like, what's something you would be proud to be part of? And I like that. Like, to me, that is the magic combo. What are you proud to be part of? What's a great business? Because when there's a great business, there can be a lot of opportunity. It's not like the other ones are worse. It's just a different path. So Matthew and Lee had done something before business school that tracked web spammers online. So they knew a lot about cybersecurity. And Matthew and I were in class together at school. And he was always talking about, he was very proud of what him and Lee had built at Project Honeypot. And he was always talking about it. And that's really where where the expertise came from. And I remember just I loved bouncing ideas off of. I love brainstorming, kicking ideas around, debating good, bad. And Matthew and I made really great collaboration partners, like sparring partners. And I just remember thinking, wow, if we could create a service that makes the internet more safe and faster for everybody, like small businesses up to big companies, I'd be really proud to be part of that. That was my starting point. And back to a little bit like this theme now that we're having this conversation, Carly, so I'm becoming clear. It's like, it wasn't like I had to decide on day one. I just had to decide to work on it as a school project. It kind of became a way to de-risk this situation where I was like, I'm not like dropping out of school. I'm still going to get my degree. And I'm going to, by the way, do this other independent project with a legitimate company that already existed. But actually, instead of taking a class for school credit, let's see if we can build this idea out. And while I wasn't an expert, and I asked myself many times, do I have any business really starting this company? I was like, why would I who do I think I have anything to add in this space? I was very drawn to the idea of if we were successful, we could really make a big impact in the world. And I would be proud to be part of that impact, making things safer and more fast. I'm like, that's cool. I'm like, awesome. And so that was a North Star. And then I thought there was a great business, and that was another North Star. So then I was just like, okay, so then I have a lot to learn. And again, I had two people that I started with who knew a lot. They were very technical. And then the next couple of people we hired were also very technical, and they were writing a lot of code and architecting the whole thing. And I felt a little, I would say, sheepish because I wasn't writing code. And obviously, early stage of the company, that was really important. And we'd go out for lunch every day. This was back to the five of us were sitting in a room and down in Palo Alto. We'd go to lunch every day. And so I was basically at lunch with four engineers. Matthew was the CEO, but he's very technical, and they'd be chatting everything. And I'd go back to the office, look up all the words, all the technical things they were talking about. And I actually think this is where my science, my chemistry business experience came in, where it's like I took technical things and translated it to something people could understand because I didn't understand the technical side. So I had to translate it to something more accessible. And I think that was really helpful early on. And we were doing something technical, and I was learning a ton, and I feel like I haven't stopped learning since.
There's so many nuggets in that answer, purely because one, I think you're so right, probably skewed towards more women, but it's so easy to just gravitate and go towards what do you love, and that will equate to what you're good at, rather than thinking, what will I be proud of? And what's a great business opportunity? I love that. I think that's something that isn't talked about enough, or at least isn't celebrated enough. Especially for founding, you're hearing all the horror stories, so you have to love it. So I think that is really, really incredible. And then that last bit of you just constantly learning, I think what's really powerful about that is at the end of the day, that probably brought, I, from the outside, right, brought Cloudflare so much success because your customers aren't necessarily so technical, right? So you were probably that bridge between the customers and this highly technical cybersecurity company. Is that right? Would you agree?
Yes, but this is where my Saskatchewan roots come in. I'm like, but also I wouldn't want to overstate it. I've definitely added value. And also, just being in the office, you see things differently. And I brought other things to the table. And really what it ended up being is Matthew brought so many skill sets. Lee brought so many skill sets. I brought so many skill sets. Maybe not in the domain, but I brought other skill sets. I had lots of experiences, and we were a Venn diagram that covered a lot of surface area. There's a little bit overlap with the Venn diagram, but we covered so much surface area. And actually, that's a really great foundation to build a company from. But the shared vision, the shared respect Matthew, Lee, and I all had for each other was very strong. And to this day, Lee left years ago. He's very, very sick. It's a very sad story. He and I are still running the company. And out of everything, that's actually one of the things I'm most proud of. It's finding someone that you can still work with 15 years later, that you've gone through so many highs and lows with, that you're still so committed to this idea that we both believe in, this mission we both believe in so deeply. And it's like I'm so proud of what we've accomplished 15 years in, but then I have this really cheesy saying, we're just getting started. I feel like it's almost like day 2 at Cloudflare. There's just so much opportunity ahead. And this year, Microsoft turned 50 years old. And actually, it was interesting. I didn't start Cloudflare thinking this, but now my perspective is, oh my God, one day Cloudflare will turn 50 years old. Whether I'm still here or not, different story. But it's just I think we've created something that is generational. And I'm just so humbled by that. I'm so proud by that. And I'm just it's amazing what a group of smart people can accomplish that are rowing in the right direction. And I've just been able to work with such incredible people at Cloudflare and with our customers.
It's phenomenal. It's amazing. By the way, for those who are listening, it is so, so sad, but an incredible piece on Wired about Lee Holloway and his whole story and his process and journey through it all. So it is incredible. And you even mentioned the highs and lows, right? And I think from the outside, people can see, Cloudflare is $60 billion market cap right now, but there's so much that goes on inside that, kind of differs from that narrative. Is there a story or memory from those super early days, or at least in those first few years where we're just so low, and how did you get through that? It's something that people don't necessarily see.
I don't really like telling a story, but I think it's appropriate in this situation. So, we started to do this and I loved it. And we were doing well, but gosh, it is hard to build a company. It is hard, hard, hard. Even when you're successful, it's hard. It requires a lot of energy in the broad sense of like time and effort and resources. You're trying to creating anything from scratch just requires a lot. And so, especially with what we were trying to do. And I remember I was still really connected to Harvard Business School, and a professor was in town, and he's a really kind of a famous professor, and he organized a small group dinner, and I went and really liked this person. I was excited to see him, and I mean, maybe looking back, I was a little depressed. I think there's a lot of actually most founders have some depression at some point because it's so hard. We were talking about entrepreneurship, and I kind of said, we were a few years in at this point. I was like, I just don't understand why anyone starts a company. And again, it was a safe space, and I felt like it was like the first time I could say it out loud. I just don't understand why anyone does this. And people were like offended that I said that. I got some feedback, I guess, on the moment of being like, Michelle, you can't say that. Cloudflare's like, you're so successful. You've raised money. You can hire good people. You cannot go around saying that. And I was like, it's so hard. And so what do I mean by that? And again, I cared, and that's part of my personality. And I think like I cared so much. So I could hard not to separate, like not taking these things personally, but recruiting the first few people are hard, but gosh, recruiting number employee 50, really hard. Because if you're employed at LinkedIn, you're not leaving LinkedIn to go join a team of 50 people. You're just not. You're going to wait for them to have 100 million in revenue, and then you might join because you want to go from the 100 million to $1 billion rise. But like to get the $100 million in revenue, you need really great people. This is in a B2B sense. And so you're recruiting on top of your day job all the time to get great people to come join, and for people who have the talent and the aptitude, who care what you're doing. And so that was like one piece. I still maintain to this day, like getting great person versus good person is like a huge difference. And we were just like so obsessed with getting great people. And it required a lot of effort. And Matthew and I were very involved in that, as well as Lee, because people were coming to work for us, like as a founder-led business. And I think it ended up paying dividends. But how about this? I couldn't outsource it. I didn't feel like we could outsource that. So you're like doing your job plus doing all these things on top of the job, which just means now you're working all the time. Or again, and maybe someone else does it better than us, but I don't know if there's another way. And so the highs and lows where you build a relationship with a customer and then you let them down. Like either some commitment you promised them doesn't ship on time, or for us, if we had an outage and it impacted their business, again, it's hard not to take that personally, especially in the early days. And you're just like, oh my gosh, like I let you down and we let you down, and that feels hard. There's just lots of different things that came up over the years. And I remember there was somebody who we literally, again, hiring was a big topic all the time, and we kind of got like a brand name person to join. And then the day before he started, he reneged on his offer. And it went from like a high of like, oh my God, we're winning. Yes, it's happening, to, okay, head fake, just kidding. Like the universe says, nope, got to keep going, find somebody else.
Wow. And Michelle, I think on that hiring piece real quick, and would you do the same thing now? But do you find that it was hard to outsource, or at least, trickle it down to hire because you, Matthew, Lee, just held such a high bar for talent? Or was it a cultural thing that you wanted to ensure there's alignment? Like what pieces were just so crucial that you kept it founder-led?
We had a recruiter. I think employee number 60 at Cloudflare was a recruiter. He was great. He stayed for many, many years. Today, someone joins Cloudflare, they don't need to meet the person running all of engineering. But like when you're joining a small company, it's hard. Like most people don't take those jobs. And so it was one of these things where the way that we counteracted that was being more involved. And so we were able to get, I would say, hire more easily than other companies our sizes and peers our size, which was good, but it required more effort from us. And so it's kind of like, it was almost like the solution to the problem, but then a solution caused more work on us. And it was almost like there are so many tunnels you have to go through when you're building a company, where you're just like, and the only way through the tunnel is through the tunnel. Like you just like, is it ideal? No. Do I want all that extra workload? No. But like, there's no one else. If not you, there's no one else to give it to. You just got to do it. And I remember I was, a few years later, we were getting ready for a board meeting, and we had a new exec on the team, and we were going through the board materials, and there was something that was wrong. And it was like not their role. And this person was like, I got to go home and get my family commitment done. And you're just like, okay, you go do that. And I remember like being at the office at 9:00, finishing the board slides for this other person. And I'm just like, well, I have a family commitment too, but I had no one to, it was just one of these things where it's like somebody has to be willing to do the last leg. And often it's the one that cares the most. And often
And
the
those
ones
are the founders.
are the
Yeah.
founders.
Wow. So at the end of the day, even with a scaled company, hundreds of employees, you will probably be the one that it falls onto for the dirty work or whatever, just because you care the most.
2 comments on that. So I remember we hit 100 million in revenue. I was talking to a VC and I said, "Oh yeah, we just hit 100 million in revenue run rate." And this VC said, "Oh, congratulations. Going from 100 million to a billion is way more fun than going from 1 to 100." And I remember saying, "Well, I've never done it. I'll let you know." He was right. I think it's just hard to go from 1 to 100. And it's highs and lows 10 times a day. And it's kind of like a rite of passage. And as we go on, the entrepreneurs share more knowledge. I think AI is making some things easier, but they're just like, if you're successful, there's fires. If you're not successful, there's fires. There's like, it's just hard. It's lots of like highs and lows. 100 million to a billion in that when you're scaling your business, you start to bring in folks who can help put in more process and systems. And the highs and lows spread out much more. So it's more enjoyable. And so there are still highs and lows. That's amazing, but it's more operates like how humans are meant to be operated. It's less whiplash and it's more spread out. So you still have your highs and you're launching products and you're high five and winning those big deals. And of course, you have your lows and you learn from it in these crises, but they're much more spread out. So it's much more manageable from an emotional standpoint. And so then it's fun. Like then it's really fun. And you're just like, this is awesome. And we're going to learn from this and get better. And oh my God, look at what we're able to do. Or just a new high every time. Let's reset the bar. That's fun. And so I think that person's advice was true. Again, I wouldn't trade it for the world. It's been amazing. But I share that because it was where your question came from. It's like, oh, everything looks so rosy and shiny. It is rosy and shiny, but gosh, I went to that dinner that night being like, why does anyone do this? And I think it takes 2 to 5 years of founders at some point think that, but it's not acceptable to talk about it.
Before I even go on to more of like the personal side, being a woman in this space, all of that, you touched on how like that 0 to 100 is incredibly hard, the whiplash of it all. I find that while I was working at a venture capital firm, and just learning by other founder stories, I think it's quite common for founders to lie to themselves that they got product market fit. And the reason why I'm bringing this up, by the way, is like I think it's such a tangible lesson for founders to recognize what true product market fit could look like. And so just researching about Cloudflare, you had customers where it was like the first night in years that they could sleep through the night without getting a pager, that they're getting a cyber attack. Or I think there was a survey that you put out where one user said, in terms of what are the problems that they face, web scammers made me believe in the death penalty. Like truly, like really stark feelings that make it so tangible. I want to know, just build on that. Like, was it something that was so clear to you where you were like, we're on to something, we just have to run? Or was there ever a question of like, are we approaching it the right way? How did you think about it all?
Yes. Well, I think this is back to, and again, this is my personality trait. And I'm like, on one side, I'm proud to tell the story because I think it'll resonate with some folks. And there's other folks who are going to hear the story and be like, oh my God, she was never really committed. And that's not the lesson to be learned. Because there's back to there's some founders who know they're going to start a company or are going to do whatever it takes to make it happen. And mine was a more slow burn. The best thing I could describe is like I fell more in love with the idea as time passed. I became more and more convicted by the idea as time passed. That doesn't mean I wasn't going to disappear. It wasn't like that at all. But my personality more was like, I want to see it and then I'll start to believe it more versus I'm all in and being let down by it, I guess. So that's just a little bit more of my personality trait, I think. And so it's more of the slow burn. And so we were working on Cloudflare. So like we had a company, we had employees, we were working on it. And I'm doing this full time, all in, working very hard. But you don't know whether it's going to work. Like, and by the way, most of this, you read all the stats, 95% of companies, startups that start fail. Like I remember reading that in a book and being like, what am I doing with my life? Like, why am I doing something that 95% of the chance, like my brand was more like my brand as a person was kind of being successful. I'm like, why am I doing something thinking it's going to fail? I had a visceral reaction to that stat and I threw the book aside. I was like, okay, anyhow. So, but you're right. Like we were very humbled by like, okay, this isn't a given. We got to like go, we have to make sure. So we ran a private pilot for a while, like a private beta, what we called it. Trying to get the first 100 customers was so hard. Like I certainly did not think we had product market fit the first 100 customers. It was like pulling teeth. Very difficult, very hard, not clear at all. But when we talked to them, I remember the first 10 that signed up, we broke 9 of the 10 sites. So they're upset and 1 worked. And then we went and fixed all the product. And the next 10 that signed up, 6 worked. And then we kind of used that to get better. And then we were really embarrassed by the product that we had in this private beta because it for sure did not have all the functionality. And at that point, I was doing a lot of Skype calls. Skype was the communication tool of choice back then. It would be different today. And I would Skype all our users, be like, hey, like I'm one of the founders, love to chat with you. And they all, of course, would be thrilled. And I learned about our customers and there's all these small businesses. It was early on. And this person was just like, honestly, I was embarrassed by a product. This person signed up. We didn't break their site. So I was happy about that, but I was embarrassed by a product. And this person I got on the call was so happy. It was like, oh my God, for the first time in 5 years, my pager didn't wake me up last night. And I was like, really? And I was like, oh, but we don't have this. He's like, and I'm like, how do you know? Like, and he's like, and you're making my site faster and all this stuff. And I'm like, how do you know all that? He's like, well, I have all the metrics on my side. And I was really embarrassed that we didn't have the metrics built into our product yet. But like what I didn't realize, this business owner made me realize they had all the metrics. They could see it. So he was telling me all the value he was getting from our product. And honestly, Carly, it was like the biggest shot of, what is it, dopamine? Like I was like on cloud nine. You're like, okay, I can do anything right now because you just feel so good. And you go back to the team, be like, oh my God, we're like making a difference. And so do you think like you have a full product market fit for everyone? No, but does that fuel you? 1,000%. And so it's like these one conversation can change the course of so many things and both for good or bad. And this, like those conversations like that. And then we held on to like pebbles of that to like fuel us and help us through all the hard things that we had to get done. And again, we had a lot of that. We also had a lot of people who were like, I'm never going to use this and this is never going to work. Like it wasn't all that, but some of that made all those other things easier to be like a duck and let it roll off your back versus it was those moments that we like held on to because we were so visceral. And that lasted for years. Like, I mean, like even 5 years later. And I remember we were putting together the budget for the year. And again, at this point, we had raised a lot of money and we had, I don't know, like hundreds of people working for us. And I remember I was working with one of our execs and we were putting our budget together. And I was like, wow, this is actually a real business. Like, it was just kind of like this. But I think it was more about being humbled by it and hungry and not arrogant about it and being like, we have to go prove this out every single day. We got to fight for everything. And a little bit like be paranoid about making sure you're doing the right things. But like, are you solving real problems for your customers? And when they said yes and how much value we're getting from them. So I guess what I'm trying to say, we were very hard on ourselves. And often those stories help validate the stuff we were doing because we were hard on ourselves. We are still hard on ourselves to this day. And sometimes I get on the phone with a customer, I'm like, we should be less hard on ourselves. Like we're actually really good at what we do. We should stop being less so hard on ourselves.
Although I think there's value in that, right? Like other incredible founders, I think having that level of paranoia is probably very healthy and what keeps it quite, successful and going and like striving for more rather than being satisfied. So I think there's something quite interesting there. The other thing too in that story is I think that's important to know is you guys seem to have embodied the mindset of just ship it. It's not perfect, but just ship it and find out and then talk to customers and iterate and learn rather than kind of waiting it out, making it the perfect product that you think it is and then shipping it. So I think that's also quite valuable and important. You mentioned that it was your brand as a person to be successful just now. And I think what's really fascinating to me and what I would love to know is pre-HBS Michelle or even, HBS Michelle's success was very different than Michelle's success today. I want to know over time, like as Cloudflare went public, where it stands today, what elements of your personal life, relationships in your life change because of your because of your success that kind of gave you a bigger lesson of humanity, if you will?
Relationships and people is a long narrative of my life. People, community, relationships, like I value those and I come from a family where you value that. And so a couple of interesting things. So Matthew and I still work together. So proud of that. Like really probably the most proud thing that I am as running Cloudflare. It's like one of my most proud things. Like I'm so proud. My boyfriend that I mentioned that I said, hey, I'll go move to Vancouver if this didn't work out. He's now my husband. We're now married and he's an entrepreneur too. We have
Jamie. Stuck
Jamie.
through.
Yes. Well, not like it's just like we met in our 20s before either of us had the careers we've had, and we've both been super successful. And now we have two kids, and we kind of he's Canadian too, and we kind of sometimes look at each other like, how did we meet on this random Friday at a Chinese New Year's retirement party lunch? And end up both entrepreneurs living in San Francisco, building these career of our dreams. Like it was like, and his background was also like he did not have role models in his life that led it, but we found each other and we made it happen together, which is super awesome. And so, and like, I love that I kind of have this life partner that's been a huge part of Cloudflare from the beginning. And there's so many times where, again, I'm so lucky. This is not everybody where he could have been like, don't do it or, oh, that's too risky. he was always like, you should see where this goes. You should follow your dreams. Don't move to Vancouver for me. Like, go start Cloudflare in San Francisco. You got to see where it goes. And I mean, I don't ever try and take that for granted because not everyone is in that situation. And so we're still together after all these years, which is pretty amazing. Like, and again, we've grown together. And I'm very proud of that. And I try to talk about it because I'm just like, I love that I have this great life partner. We have a great family and I love my job. Like, that's awesome. And again, I think is it always easy? Absolutely not. Are there way too many balls in the air? Totally. But I don't mind that. I don't mind lots of balls in the air. I just don't like when the glass ones drop. It's just like I like having that very full life and kind of the different dynamics, and so I prioritize all 3. In terms of other folks, like, I think that's been interesting is life is a collection of experiences, and, you go through life, you collect these experiences, and there's some threads that stay throughout, like, where it's I have some of my university girlfriends and I'm still really close to, and I'm, like, so grateful for them because they know me from, like, that university, Michelle, and they don't even live in San Francisco, so they don't even really know, like, they don't see me on a daily basis here, and then some new friends that I've met kinda, like, now that I'm in SF and raising my kids here, you meet other people at school and your community here, like, you build friendships with where you live, and then in my job, like, I just meet lots of interesting people, both inside Cloudflare, customers, and then just, like, in the industry, and so I like you kinda look back and you're like, "Wow, I have a pretty large community of folks," and if you can surround yourself with really good people, that's a good place to be, and again, I'm in my 40s, I just feel like I know a lot of folks, and some of them I see regularly, others it's once in a while, but I would have more people to reach out to today if I was ever thinking through a decision than I did when I was in my 20s, and that takes time, a lot of time.
Absolutely. I love that. And you mentioned you have 2 kids? Are they boys, girls, daughters, or?
I have one of each. Yeah.
Okay. So I want to know, given where you are today and the lessons you've learned about leadership, but also just about power and being a woman in a male dominated space, what is a lesson that you will absolutely make sure your daughter, maybe both kids, but specifically your daughter will understand and will know as she grows up?
We have to check back on this one, Carla. I mean, my kids are still little, like
Babies, little.
I mean, they're not babies, but they're under 12, and so I'm like, let them be kids. I like right now, their number one is playing. They just want to play. Everything in their life is about games and having fun, and I'm just like, honestly, let's just play games and have fun. I think that's awesome. I think about this, I'm like, oh my gosh, like there are so many amazing women in technology, but there are for sure many more men. And we have a lot of work to be done. We have a lot of work to do. And again, I've been so lucky. I have business partners who've always treated me so equal. Our board has been so favorable to us. My shareholders, like I like love that. I think at Cloudflare, I'm so lucky. But that's not universal. It's not easy. And even then it's still hard. And so you're just like, okay, we have a lot of work to do as an industry. And so I'm always like, oh, for my son, my daughter. But I think that we'll figure that out. And I think some of the skills of like being resilient, the grit, like I think the grit is really important. I definitely have a lot of grits. And sticking through things, being like, I'm gonna find a way. And even when it's hard, I think that's good. So, as a parent, sometimes it's like you see your kids struggle, you just want to go help them and fix it. You're like, I do this and it'll be fixed. And I'm trying to be like, yeah, how did that feel? Good. Okay. What do you want to do about it? Like, and again, I'm trying. I need to call some of these mentors in my life to help me. And I always try to learn from others, like from those. But for now, it's like my kids are little. So it's like, go learn, go have fun. And I think I think what you're doing with your podcast of just like widening the aperture of what's accessible. And then I think with the internet, it's amazing how you can access this content anywhere you are. And so I do think there's a lot of girls out there that will find different things and they'll be inspired by that one sentence, that one conversation, and it'll just kind of a light bulb will go off and it doesn't, it'll make them want to go try something else. And then it starts on a path. And like, I do think we're in a better situation today than, 25 years ago, where there's just so much more access to this. It's so much more easily accessible because of the internet.
Absolutely. And by the way, I think what's so interesting to me is I think grit and resilience can actually only be learned through experience, through going through tough shit. And if anything, it gives you the confidence to be like, oh, I went through that. Like, I could get through this now. I think that's a fair, parenting tactic. But I love that. Okay, Michelle, I ask every guest at the end one question, which is, what craft are you spending a lifetime honing?
Oh, that's such a good question. I need to go back and listen to what all your other guests have said because that's a really lovely gesture. Something that I'm thinking a lot about recently and the last little bit is just I am a big believer. We've talked about it a little bit today, but maybe not enough. Is it is amazing what a group of people can accomplish that are rowing in the same direction. And how those people feel doing it. Sometimes I look back at like my different chapters and like that's kind of what it is. It's just like I feel like I've talked a lot about me today, but like the reality is it's a group of folks and different parts along the way, especially the Cloudflare part. There's been a group, but it's like it was the we and it wasn't like everyone, but it's like these small groups of what you can accomplish and how people feel through that and the situations you go through. You see the best of people in those moments. And I feel like those are some of the stories that don't get told. And so I'm really like passionate about that. And I think that both at work, but even in my personal life, like I'm always about like, hey, what are we doing with our friends as a family? And like this kind of dinner party, like how's everyone going to feel at the beginning and at the end? And like I like the small group team we and doing something together, accomplishing something together and feeling really good about it.
I love that. And also, it's perfect to wrap it up because it goes back to what we talked about in the beginning of even just like team sports, right? I think that's the crux of basketball, of soccer, of any team sport is you're literally all working towards the same mission. And you're all going through, when you lose, when you win, everything. And I think there's such a valuable lesson in life with that. So I love that so much.
Exactly. I'm like, yes, that's exactly it. I think that's probably why I love sports so much. And then again, today I can't play sports as much in that way, but there's like all these other places you can have that same feeling. And again, I don't think that's talked about enough. And I find myself trying to seek it out, curate it, be part of it. When other people start it, like activate it. So that's the craft that I'm trying to hone.
I just have to thank you so much. I could talk to you for hours more. You are so incredible and such an inspiration. So I'm just incredibly excited to release this and share your story more. But really, thank you. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you. I so enjoyed this. I was like, we should have done this with like a meal in front of us. I could have talked to you for hours and
I agree.
thank you so much for researching so much of my background. You had such great questions and I really enjoyed our conversation today. And I'm excited for you to release it. And I hope some folks listen and be like, oh, that was really cool and
Oh,
go do
absolutely.
something with it. Yeah.
I have no doubt.